All right, boys and girls, welcome to Pick Your Battle, the newest MMA prediction and fight card breakdown channel on YouTube. My name is Abi, and boy, am I excited for the fights this week. We have Conor McGregor taking on Max Holloway in the main event, and we have Benoit Saint Denis taking on Paddy Pimblett in the co-main. Without much further ado, let's jump right in. And opening up this fight card, we have Alessandro Costa taking on Cody Durden in the flyweight division. Cody Durden comes in with a record of 18 wins, 10 losses, and 1 draw. And Alessandro Costa comes in with a 16 win, 5 loss record. We have Cody Durden as a plus 215 underdog and Alessandro Costa as a minus 260 favorite. Now, this fight in the flyweight division is a classic striker versus grappler matchup, with Cody Durden being the pressure wrestler and Alessandro Costa being the more technical striker. It really will come down to who can dictate where the fight takes place. So let's start off with Alessandro Costa. Now, this guy is a tiny ball of muscle who has unique power to the flyweight division. You don't really see a lot of people fighting with the amount of power and ending his opponents the way he does. He is built like a tank, and he's coming off of a quick finish over Matt Schnell, and prior to that it was a beautiful body shot against Stuart Nickel. He isn't just an accurate striker, but he does have genuine knockout power for the weight class. One weapon that Alessandro Costa possesses that doesn't get talked about enough is his calf kick. Against Kevin Borjas, it completely disrupted Borjas' momentum and ultimately led to the ground and pound finish. Now, against a pressure wrestler like Cody Durden, I think this weapon's going to be really effective because damaging Durden's lead leg can make changing levels much harder to execute on Alessandro Costa. The downside to Costa's style, though, is that he can sometimes fall in love with his power. He overcommits to shots in the pocket, swinging in, and honestly, that can open up windows for Cody Durden to take Alessandro Costa down to the ground. And that brings us to Cody Durden. He is a relentless wrestler with excellent cardio, a ton of heart, and he's willing to grind his opponents down for the full 15 minutes. Doesn't matter who is in front of him, he comes pretty much with the same game plan. Averages nearly 4 takedowns per fight, and he commits to that game plan regardless of who's standing in front of him. One thing I noticed watching tape on Durden is that people actually give him a lot of when he's a good fighter. At least initially in the fight, Cody Durden is able to execute his game plan, but eventually, whether it's fatigue or bad fight IQ, the fight starts to slip away from him. And that's what we've seen in his last 4 losses before his last fight, where he came out with a decision win. That lines up with another interesting trend. Many of Cody Durden's losses come in the second round after the wrestling fades or as he gets fatigued. If we look at the grappling perspective, this would be the easiest path of victory for Cody Durden to win this fight. Costa has excellent takedown defense on paper, around 86%. So taking him to the ground is not going to be easy. The bigger concern is what actually happens if Durden secures those takedowns. Watching tape, I've noticed Alessandro Costa be very comfortable fighting off of his back, looking for submissions, or just holding his opponents in closed guard, which I don't think is a good idea in fighting Cody Durden. On top of that, there are times where Alessandro Costa himself engages in the grappling, taking his opponent's back, but more often than not, what I've noticed is Costa jumps way too high on the opponent's back and he gets too easily shucked off. And I think that could be an excellent way for Cody Durden to game plan getting him to the ground. If Costa were to jump on his back, shuck him off, start raining ground and pound from top position. Because if Cody Durden ends up on top, I think that's where he's going to win this fight. Now, looking at it from a striking perspective, this is where I see Alessandro Costa really shining. Again, he's someone who has a lot of power in the striking department, similar to a Bruno Silva, a Joshua Van. You're able to touch people and knock them down. Durden throws with volume and aggression, but he swarms his opponents with hooks and overhands while keeping his hands low. But the problem is that he doesn't possess the same power that Alessandro Costa does. Statistically, they're actually quite similar in terms of the striking output as well as the striking volume that they absorb, although Costa does have the slight advantage in the striking defense. If this fight remains standing, I do see Alessandro Costa touching Cody Durden's chin and dropping him at least one time, if not dropping him and finding the finish. So my official pick, give me Alessandro Costa by knockout in the second round, although I would not be surprised to see a finish in the third round. If you're betting on the fight, I'm going to say that the best play for this fight is going to be Alessandro Costa by KO or decision. Very second fight of the night, we have Ryan Gandra taking on Zachary Reese. We have Ryan Gandra coming in with a record of 9 wins, 1 loss. Zachary Reese coming in with a record of 10 wins, 3 losses. Ryan Gandra is 5-0 in his last 5. Zachary Reese, on the other hand, a more colored record, 2 wins, 2 losses, and 1 no contest in his last 5. Ryan Gandra is a minus 135 favorite, and Zachary Reese is a plus 110 underdog. First off, I want to say that this fight is not going to see the judges' scorecards. Both fighters are violent, and especially given Ryan Gandra's pressure, I see this fight ending early. Let's start off with Ryan Gandra. Ryan Gandra used to fight in the heavyweight division early in his pro career before making the disciplined approach to cut weight and coming down to middleweight where he currently fights. He's one of the more intriguing prospects to come out of Dana White's Contender Series because this guy is exciting to watch. He comes in with power. He comes in with veteran savvy despite only having 10 fights of knowing when his opponents are breaking down mentally and physically and executing an excellent finish. In all his fights, including the Dana White's Contender Series fight, you see this trait very, very much on display. What impressed me the most about Ryan Gandra is not just his size and the frame, it's also the power that he possesses. When Ryan Gandra touches his opponents, you know that they're feeling a lot of pain. He keeps a high guard and is technically responsible with his striking as well. He's got excellent teeps, body kicks, he works well in the clinch with knees, and he does a good job controlling his opponents against the fence until he decides it's beneficial for him to disengage, and usually does that with throwing some combos out of the pocket. He also has solid defensive wrestling habits, which is a good thing when facing Zachary Reese. I say this because if you look at some of his older fights, Ryan Gandra is actually responsible in getting the whizzer, which prevents the opponents from finishing the takedowns, which I think will be an effective tool against Zachary Reese here as well. All in all, Ryan Gandra is best when he's dictating the pace and the intensity of the fight, rather than fighting a long technical battle. Now, moving on to Zachary Reese. Man, what do I say about Zachary Reese? This guy came in with so much hype into the UFC, and everyone, I mean every YouTuber out here, was all over him. I don't really see what the big deal is about Zachary Reese. I mean, there is raw talent there, but it's just not refined, and definitely not refined to face opponents at the highest level here. Zachary Reese has great grappling, which I think is going to be one of his main weapons in this fight. And aside from that, the striking's nothing great to look at. He's got good calf kicks, but nothing to write home about. Zachary Reese wins. I can see him using his grappling to get control and possibly a submission. But I really, really don't think he has a good path to victory here. And I say that because Ryan Gandra is not clueless on the mat. He owns multiple arm triangle victories and has shown enough composure that I trust him, and I don't think that Zachary Reese is going to dominate him on the ground. Zachary Reese has had poor fight IQ moments in his last few fights. I mean, don't even get me started on that Michel Pereira fight. I'm going to be sick if I have to watch that one more time. Horrible fight. I don't recommend you go back and watch it. But I think that Zachary Reese's poor fight IQ and poor striking is actually going to get him in a lot of trouble in this fight. I think what Ryan Gandra is going to do in this fight is he's going to pressure Zachary Reese towards the cage. He's going to force exchanges, and at the right moment, he's going to land a knockout on Zachary Reese. One more interesting thing to note is that both Zachary Reese and Ryan Gandra have a common opponent in Jose Medina, who's now no longer in the UFC. If you look at how they fought him, Ryan Gandra finished Jose Medina in the very first round, and Zachary Reese, on the other hand, went all the way to a decision with him. I don't really like MMA math, but I think it makes sense in this one. For my official prediction, give me Ryan Gandra by round 1 or round 2 knockout. And for my official play, Give me Ryan Gandra by knockout. All right, on the next fight of the night, we have Damien the Baba Yaga Pinas taking on Cesar Almeida in the middleweight division. We have Damien coming in with a record of 9 wins, 1 loss, and Cesar Almeida coming in with a record of 7 wins, 2 losses. Currently, they have Damien Pinas at a minus 220 odd and Cesar Almeida at plus 185. The one thing to note about this fight is the massive gap in age. Damien Pinas is 24 years old and Cesar Almeida is sitting at a ripe 38 years old. Too old to be a fighter in my opinion. But let's jump into this fight. First off, we have Damien Pinas. Damien Pinas is an explosive fighter. I think he's the future of the middleweight division because of his youth, his explosive power, and that twitch muscle reaction, which a lot of fighters wish they could have, but is a gift that you're born with naturally. The more I look at this fight, the more it looks like a coughing baby versus a hydrogen bomb scenario. I think Damien Pinas finishes his fight. I think he finishes his fight early, under 7 minutes and 30 seconds, so a round and a half. But let's look into this fight a little more because there are a few things I'd like to point out. So with Damien Pinas, he, like I mentioned, fights with a lot of explosiveness and power. But if you look at his tape, especially his fight in the VXFC against Carlos Matos, that's where he's gone the farthest into round 2, and that's where you have some questions coming up about his durability and especially what happens when he's taken to the ground. In that fight, Pinas tried wrestling a few times and it kind of backfired on him multiple times. He reversed repeatedly, he spent extended time on bottom and looked noticeably fatigued by the second round while he was trying to escape the clinch. Now I'm pointing this out because there have been instances in the past where Cesar Almeida's opponents, once they felt the kickboxing prowess, have turned into wrestlers. I don't think that happens this time around, but the big question is what happens if the fight does get extended into round 2. That's where Cesar Almeida comes in. Cesar Almeida has an amazing kickboxing record. His claim to fame is fighting Alex Pereira 3 times. And technically, he is the cleanest striker. He has excellent timing. He has good pull counters and enough experience that very little surprises him. One sequence I really enjoyed watching Cesar Almeida pull out in the Cesare Oleksiejczuk fight was drawing out the attacks and then answering with clean pull counters. I think this can be dangerous against Pinas, but I don't know if he actually has the power or the explosivity to actually catch Pinas at the right time. Another thing to note is against Roman Kopylov, Cesar Almeida kept throwing these naked kicks that Roman Kopylov kept taking advantage of by blasting him right in the face. The only mistake that Roman Kopylov made at that point was letting Cesar Almeida get up multiple times. I don't think Pinas is going to allow Cesar Almeida to get up. I think he jumps on him as soon as Cesar Almeida hits the ground if he catches him on one of these counters and finishes him in the very first round. For my official prediction, give me Damien Pinas to win this fight by round 1 or round 2 knockout. For my official play, I'm going to take that the fight goes under 1.5 rounds. Next up, we have Tracy Cortez taking on Kong Wang in the women's flyweight division. Tracy Cortez coming in with a record of 12 wins, 3 losses. Kong Wang with 9 wins, 1 loss. We have Tracy Cortez as a minus 105 and Kong Wang sitting at minus 115 on the betting odds. Yeah, I don't really care enough about this fight to give a breakdown. Whenever I've trusted Kong Wang, she's let me down. So for my official prediction, give me Tracy Cortez. Okay. Next up in the UFC lightweight division, we have Kai Kamaka III taking on Luke Riley. Kai Kamaka coming in with a record of 18 wins, 7 losses, 1 draw. Luke Riley, an undefeated prospect at 13-0. Kai is currently sitting at a plus 240 underdog price, and we have Luke Riley at a minus 300 favorite price. This is one of the more interesting fights on the card because it pits raw talent against experience. Luke Riley looks like one of the more brighter prospects coming through the division. He's explosive, powerful, and incredibly sharp with his hands. But this is also a massive step up in competition when you compare the last couple of fights that Riley's had with Bogdan Grad and Michael Aswell Jr. Kai Kamaka, on the other hand, has already been to the UFC once. He's fought his way back into the promotion and has seen far more styles than Riley has at this stage of his career. So let's jump into this fight. With Luke Riley fighting out of England, he really reminds me a lot of his teammate Loner Kavanagh. He's explosive when he enters the pocket, he throws fast combinations, carries genuine knockout power. The knockout over Bogdan Grad showed exactly how dangerous he can be once he finds his timing. But honestly, what confused me was what happened afterwards. He goes from knocking out Bogdan Grad to going the distance against Michael Aswell Jr., who I don't think possesses the same kind of finishing ability. That inconsistency makes me hesitant to completely buy into the hype of Luke Riley just yet. Technically, Riley's biggest strengths are his speed, his timing, and his power. When he gets into a rhythm, he's quite a difficult guy to deal with. Now, watching tape on Luke Riley, there were a few concerns that I had. 3 big concerns that I should name, really. And the first is that Luke Riley does not properly establish the center of the cage early. He often starts close to the fence, immediately giving opponents opportunities to pressure him backwards. Secondly, he has a tendency to repeat the same combinations. And when you repeat combinations multiple times, your opponents find your rhythm and can counter. Against lower level opponents, that's fine, but with an experienced fighter like Kai Kamaka, I would not repeat my patterns regularly with my combinations. And finally, and third, my biggest concern, he often exits exchanges with his hands low. This is something that we saw with his teammate as well, Loner Kavanagh, and even his coaches addressed it in his fight against Michael Aswell Jr. If Riley does not clean that up, eventually someone is going to make him pay. Now, looking at Kai Kamaka III, he's exactly the kind of veteran that prospects hate fighting. He's already experienced getting cut from the UFC, rebuilt his career, and earned his way back. That tells me a lot about his mentality. He's tough, composed under pressure, and doesn't panic when fights become chaotic. Stylistically, I think Kamaka III is a true mixed martial artist. He mixes punches, kicks, knees, and clinch work all together rather than relying on just one weapon. If you look at his last fight against Dakota Hope, I think he did an excellent job taking the center of the cage, forcing clinch exchanges, and landing damaging knees and elbows. One thing that also stands out is how well he times his opponents crashing into the pocket recklessly. Now, that is something that I've seen Riley do occasionally, I guess, and it's a shot that Kamaka is going to be waiting for. Another added bonus in Kai Kamaka's favor, in my opinion, is the fact that Eric Nixick is his coach. I'm a huge fan of Eric Nixick, and I think they always come up with great game plans. Despite all the advantages that Kai Kamaka might be coming in with, I still think that Riley is the better athlete. He's faster, sharper, and he has the cleaner boxing, even though he drops his hands down sometimes while exchanging. I also think that Kamaka is durable enough that Riley won't actually find the finish on him in this fight. I think that has to be said, that Kamaka is not chinny. He will use the wrestling against the cage to buy himself time and won't take more damaging shots. However, from a betting perspective, I don't think Luke Riley should be played from the moneyline perspective. I think Kai Kamaka makes this fight much more competitive than people are giving him credit for or the betting line suggests. His experience, toughness, and game planning should allow him to exploit several of Riley's habits, and I wouldn't be surprised if he spent significant time controlling Riley against the cage. In the end, though, for my official prediction, I'm going to trust my gut, and I'm going to go with Luke Riley to win this fight by a unanimous decision. All right, next up in the UFC Bantamweight division, we have Cody Garbrandt taking on Adrian Yanez. Cody Garbrandt comes in with a record of 15 wins, 7 losses. Adrian Yanez, on the other hand, comes in with 17 wins, 6 losses, and 1 draw. We have Cody at a plus 330 underdog price, and Adrian at a minus 450 favorite price. One thing to note is that Adrian Yanez is coming off of a draw, which technically should have been a win. So I think Adrian is coming in with a lot to prove in this fight. let's jump in and see what the fighting styles are like. Where do we get started with Cody Garbrandt? Former champion, had his peak, has since fallen from grace. Honestly, I look at Cody Garbrandt and I don't see too much of the fighter that he was. We're definitely looking at a fighter here who's past his prime and close to retirement. However, to talk about Cody's fight style, I think people are overlooking one of Cody's best weapons today, and that's no longer just the boxing, it's actually the clinch. If I'm coaching Cody, I'm trying to not have a clean kickboxing match with Adrian Yanez. I'm making this ugly. Pressure Adrian towards the fence, force prolonged clinch exchanges, and land elbows and short hooks. Mix in takedowns whenever they're available, and use my wrestling. I think people hear wrestling and think of double legs, but what I think of when I think of Cody Garbrandt's wrestling is backing up his opponent against the cage, just like Ricky Simon did with Adrian Yanez, landing hooks in close and making him uncomfortable in rounds 2 and 3. That's the kind of fight that Cody Garbrandt should be fighting. I don't think the problem is whether Cody can fight that way. I just don't think he has the pace or the energy to sustain it. If you look at his recent fights that reached the 3rd round with Long Zhao, Raoni Barcelos, and Trevin Jones, his offensive output had dropped dramatically in those fights. He's averaging roughly 26 significant strikes landed. Compare that to Adrian Yanez. Against Ricky Simon, he landed 70 significant strikes. Against Daniel Marcos, he landed nearly 80. That's an enormous difference in activity there. Cody also carries a negative striking differential, which can become a real concern against someone who nearly throws 6 significant strikes per minute. So even if Cody has success early on, I'm not convinced that he can maintain the pace long enough to consistently win rounds. On the other hand, we have Adrian Yanez, and I'm actually lower on Adrian than most people seem to be. Listen, there's no denying how good his boxing is, but even though he's got a beautiful jab, sharp hooks, and does an excellent job catching opponents as they enter range, I don't think he's flawless. Against Ricky Simon, I saw him repeatedly dipping his level while throwing the jab. Against the right opponent, that's an opening for head kicks and counters over the top. He also absorbed several clean power shots before eventually taking control of the fight. And so there are defensive holds. I don't think Cody's going to be the guy to consistently exploit these mistakes. One other thing that I had mentioned earlier on is Adrian Yanez is actually coming off a draw with Ricky Simon. Watch the fights back, you would not think that would be a draw. That was meant to be an Adrian Yanez win, and I personally think he was robbed. So I think he's coming here with a point to prove. I think he's going to put the pace on Cody Garbrandt, whereas Cody Garbrandt just gives me the opposite impression. If you look at his last fight with Long Zhao, he started off aggressive, and the moment Long Zhao landed a clean shot on him, you could just see Cody's confidence crumble in real time. That's exactly what I think happens here. I think he becomes hesitant, and I think that Adrian Yanez is going to capitalize on that. For my official prediction, give me Adrian to win by decision, because I don't think that he's going to finish Cody, at least not early. Official prediction, give me Adrian Yanez to win this fight by KO or by decision. I think Cody Garbrandt is good enough to last the 3 rounds, to make use of his clinch game and to buy himself some time. But I think the damage is going to accumulate. I think Adrian Yanez is going to be the better boxer and will do enough to stay safe. My best play on this fight is going to be Adrian Yanez by KO or decision. Next up, we have Gable Stevenson taking on Elisha Ellison. Gable Stevenson comes in with a record of 3 wins, no losses, whereas Elisha Ellison comes in with a record of 5 wins, 2 losses. The odds have Gable Stevenson as a minus 3,000 betting favorite, and Elisha comes in as a plus 1,200 underdog. Gable is 26 years old, and Elisha 29. Alright, I don't really think there's much to be said about this fight, in all honesty. The odds speak for themselves, and there's also a lot of hype on the Gable Stevenson side coming in after training with John Jones. For my official prediction, give me Gable Stevenson by finish. Alright, next up in the light heavyweight division, we have Robert Whittaker taking on Nikita Krylov. Robert Whittaker is coming into this fight with a record of 26 wins, 9 losses. Nikita Krylov, on the other hand, with 31 wins, 11 losses. Whitaker's last 5 has him with 2 wins and 3 losses, whereas Nikita Krylov comes in with 3 wins, 2 losses in his last 5. The bookies have Robert Whitaker as a minus 145 favorite and Nikita Krylov as a plus 125 underdog. So yeah, Whitaker first. Robert Whitaker, as I mentioned, is moving up to the light heavyweight division. He's a former champ from the middleweight division, and I think that Robert Whitaker is going to give up size, reach, and his natural physicality, making his light heavyweight debut. He wasn't really the biggest middleweight to start off with, and normally these would be concerns. To be honest, I'm Robert Whitaker's way because I think his advantage is his speed, his shot selection, and his bladed stance, which makes it really easy for him to blitz in. If we look at his last performance against RDR, I actually think that Whitaker looked much better than people may remember. If you go back and watch the tape, you'll see that at one point, he actually almost finished RDR with ground and pound before the end of the 3rd round. Technically, I think Whitaker remains one of the cleaner strikers in MMA. As I mentioned, his bladed stance, his long jab from low hand position, and his trademark overhand right is going to be really difficult for Krylov to read. One thing I love about Whitaker's game is how he disguises his kicks and hides them behind his punches. And that leads me to talking about Krylov, because Krylov has not looked great coming back after his little 2-year break over there. Krylov is still dangerous, he's experienced and unpredictable, but man, this guy has too many fights for the stage of his career that he's in, and I think this damage is going to show in this fight. If you watch his last performance against Modi Bukauskas, there were many times where Krylov just looked like he was plodding forward with his chin up in the air, hands low, and even though I do like Modi Bukauskas as a fighter, I don't rate him that highly. And despite not being the most skilled fighter, Modi was able to catch Krylov many times, timing his entry into the pocket. I also think Krylov has a habit of closing the distance immediately after throwing kicks or teeps, and that creates very predictable entries for Whitaker to read. So here's why I think Whitaker wins. The bladed stance, the explosion into range. I don't think he's going to be held up against the cage for long periods of time, because in all his last fights, I've seen Whitaker be able to find his distance and go back to his bladed stance. My biggest concern is how Whitaker is going to carry his power at light heavyweight. Looking at Robert Whitaker's career, you don't see a ton of high-level knockouts. I mean, yes, we did see him KO Ikram Aliskerov, but that was, again, a short-notice fight that Ikram wasn't ready for, in my opinion. It was a much higher step up in competition. Yes, I think Whitaker lands the better shots, but I don't think that automatically translates into a finish for him. For my official prediction, I'm going to go Robert Whitaker by decision. For the best play on this fight, I'd say the money line is the best option, in my opinion. Robert Whitaker at minus 145. All right, next up in the UFC lightweight division, we have Bobby King Green taking on Terrence T-Rex McKinney. Bobby Green comes in with a record of 35 wins, 17 losses, 1 draw. And you have T-Rex coming in with 18 wins and 8 losses. In his last 5, Bobby Green is 3-2. Kinney, on the other hand, is 3-2 as well in his last 5. The bookies have Bobby Green sitting as a plus 120 underdog and Terrence McKinney as a minus 140 favorite. In my opinion, this fight just screams violence. Let's jump right into it. I don't really have a lot to say on this fight, and it's not because it's not worth talking about the stylistic matchup. It's just that I'm a huge Terrence McKinney fan, so this pick might be biased. I just think this guy comes in with all the will to win in the very first round. Like a lot of YouTuber prediction channels might be telling you, T-Rex could be the champion of the world if fights were only 1 round. This guy comes in with intent to kill. He has multiple ways to win, whether it's a knockout, a submission. He just throws all his energy into the first round. Bobby Green is a very psychological fighter more than he is a technical striker. His hands are low. He tries to play mind games with you. He talks at you almost like a Kevin Holland type of persona and tries to force you to make mistakes that he capitalizes on. I mean, kudos to him for that win against Daniel Zellhuber. It's not really a fighter that I rate that highly. I think Daniel Zellhuber should not be in the UFC. But that being said, for my official prediction, give me T-Rex by absolute violence. I think this fight gets a round and a half. I think it's going to be the first round in all honesty, but I'm going to buy myself a little bit of wiggle room there with a round and a half. My best play is Terrence McKinney by finish or Terrence McKinney under a round and a half. And let's move on to the next fight. All right, in the next fight in the UFC flyweight division, we have Brandon Royval taking on Loney Kavanagh. Brandon Royval comes in to this fight with a record of 17 wins, 9 losses. Loney Kavanagh, 10 wins, 1 loss. The bookies have Brandon Royval as a plus 185 underdog, Loney Kavanagh as a minus 235 favorite. Biggest thing to note in this fight is Royval is 33 years old, almost 34, and we have Loney Kavanagh coming in at a young 27 years of age. Let's look into this fight because, in all honesty, Brandon Royval is one of my favorite UFC fighters and has been one of the more exciting flyweights to watch over the last couple of years. I am a huge Brandon Royval guy, and that's why this prediction is really tough to make because I don't think Brandon Royval wins this fight. A few years ago, I would not have hesitated picking Brandon Royval. I love his style. He's chaotic, relentless, and one of the most high-volume flyweights that we've seen. The problem is, his style only works if his body can support it, and I have huge questions about whether Brandon Royval is still there physically. Mentally, for sure, but physically, it remains to be seen. So let's look into Brandon Royval's fight style. As I mentioned, Brandon Royval is one of the more exciting flyweights that we've seen over the last couple of years. His whole style is built around overwhelming you with his pace and his volume. Now, he doesn't have the most power in the shots, but he will pepper in power shots with all the volume that you're absorbing. And I think that's where he hurts his opponents. They just don't see his power shots coming. He throws in combinations and bunches, mixes in knees beautifully in the pocket, and he slowly wins fights through attrition rather than one-shot knockout power. That worked brilliantly when his durability was at its peak, but I just don't think that's going to be the case any longer. Over the last few years, we've seen him drop by Joshua Van, we've seen Manel Kape hurt him, and sure, that's Manel Kape that we're talking about, but the visuals that I was seeing were just not that great. So I think Brandon Royval's fighting instinct and spirit is still there. I'm just not sure that the body and the durability is there anymore. Now let's look at Loney Kavanagh. Because with Loney Kavanagh, I think he's one of the more entertaining flyweights to come in with the newer generation. He explodes in behind combinations, and more importantly, he usually exits the pocket safely. But that discipline wasn't always there. I think this was highlighted in the Charles Johnson fight, where we saw Loney Kavanagh take a break while exiting the pocket with his hands low. Maybe he just didn't respect the power coming back from Charles Johnson, but that led to a finish loss for Loney Kavanagh. I think, in all honesty, that is one of the best things to have happened to Loney Kavanagh in his young career, because I've seen him make rapid adjustments while exiting the pocket ever since that one loss. In the very next fight that he took with Brandon Moreno on short notice in Mexico at altitude, he looked far more responsible defensively. The adjustments were obvious, and I think that's exactly what we want to see from a young prospect like him. So in this fight, I think that Royval starts the fight well. His pace is awkward, his volume creates problems, and he's difficult to read early. But Kavanagh strikes me as someone who makes adjustments during fights, start jumping into range behind combinations, landing his shots and exiting before Royval can return fire. Now that's the type of discipline that historically gives Royval problems, just like with the Joshua Van fight. Here's where the fight gets interesting. Everyone thinks that Loney Kavanagh is going to knock out Brandon Royval. I don't see that being the case. There's only been 2 times that Royval has been knocked out in the UFC or TKO'd. One was against Manel Kape, who is at a far different level than Loney Kavanagh. And then we have a shoulder injury that he sustained during the fight with Brandon Moreno. I think that Loney Kavanagh will have the bigger moments. I think he's going to get into the pocket, land his shots, but I just don't see him having the power to put out Brandon Royval. So for my official prediction, give me Loney Kavanagh to win this fight via unanimous decision. I think Brandon Royval is going to be tough enough to see this fight all the way through to the last bell, but he is going to be showing a lot of damage on his face, and I think Kavanagh will win enough of the meaningful moments to take a clear decision. Alright, next up in the UFC Bantamweight division, we have Corey Sandhagen taking on Mario Bautista. Corey Sandhagen is coming into this fight with a record of 18 wins, 6 losses. Mario Bautista, on the other hand, 17 wins and 3 losses. One thing to note is this is actually a rematch. The two fought back in 2019. However, given that it's been such a long time since the first meetup, I am not taking too much away from that fight, except wanted to let you know that Corey Sandhagen ended up winning that fight via armbar. Let's jump into this matchup to look at both fighters in a little more detail, because for me, Corey Sandhagen is one of my favorite fighters. He's someone that mixes up his weapons beautifully. I'm a fan of all his fights except for that one fight where he spent a ton of time on the ground wrestling Rob Font. I believe that was because of an injury that he brought into the fight. But for this fight, when I first looked at it, my initial leaning was actually towards Mario Bautista. He's younger, he's still improving. Whenever a fighter like Corey comes off a loss in a title fight, there's always questions about their mentality, where they're at, and how far they're willing to go to get back to that position for a belt. The more tape I watched, though, the more I started leaning towards Corey Sandhagen. And there's only one word to describe why. It's experience. Both Corey Sandhagen and Mario Bautista have fought good competition, but if you take a look at their records, Corey has definitely fought the higher level that Mario Bautista has yet to see. Corey has fought Peter Yan, the current champion, Umar, Marlon Vera, TJ Dillashaw, Song Yadong, Mirab Dvalishvili, and he's seen every style, every champion caliber fighter. Mario Bautista, on the other hand, has looked excellent during his rise, but he just has not been tested against the level of competition that Corey Sandhagen has. The common opponent that they fought that I'd like to talk about is Umar Nurmagomedov. Both men lost that fight, but I don't think these losses were created equal. If you look at the records, you'll see that Sandhagen fought a younger version of Umar over 25 minutes and remained competitive throughout. He defended the takedowns intelligently, stayed composed, and created offense of his own. In fact, even if you look at the stats on control time that Umar had on both Corey and Mario, although he fought Corey over 5 rounds, he actually has much more control time over Mario Bautista in their 3 rounds. Now let's talk about the stylistic matchup, because this is where I think Corey Sandhagen wins. I personally don't see Mario Bautista having a good path to victory here. Can he out-wrestle Corey? Maybe for moments. For 15 minutes, I think it's going to be a hard ask, especially if you compare him to how Umar Nurmagomedov controlled Corey. Can Mario Bautista submit Corey? I think it's highly unlikely, and I really don't see him getting the knockout either. That's more Corey's territory than Mario Bautista. So if these 3 paths become difficult, Mario Bautista is actually forced into a striking match with Corey Sandhagen, and I don't think that he's going to be successful there. This is exactly where I see Corey Sandhagen separating himself. He mixes in his weapons beautifully, as I had mentioned. He changes his rhythm consistently. He mixes elbows, knees, kicks, and punches better than anyone else in the division. So if this stays standing for a long time, I definitely see Corey coming away with the win. In fact, even though I don't think that Corey finds a finish on someone as durable as Mario Bautista, I do think that if there is a finish, it's going to come because of Corey Sandhagen's layered damage. This is something that you can see especially well in the Song Yadong fight, where the fight was actually called off because of a doctor's stoppage due to a cut that Corey had opened up on Song Yadong. So to close, I just want to say that Mario Bautista is a great fighter and he definitely belongs in this fight, but I think this is Corey's moment to shine and prove that he still belongs at the very top of the division. Unless Mario Bautista has developed a new wrinkle to his wrestling game or knockout power that we really haven't seen before, I think this is Corey's fight to win. My official prediction, give me Corey Sandhagen to win by unanimous decision or by split decision more likely. But for the best play on this fight, I would take this fight to go over a round and a half. Alright, next up in the UFC's lightweight division, we have Benoit Saint-Denis, the God of War, taking on Paddy, the Baddie Pimblett. Benoit comes in with a record of 17 wins, 3 losses. Paddy, on the other hand, comes in with 23 wins and 4 losses. The bookies have Saint-Denis sitting as a minus 145 favorite and Paddy as a plus 115 underdog. Alright, when I first saw Paddy sitting as a plus 115 underdog, I was genuinely confused. I thought the bookies got it wrong. And It's not because Benoit Saint Denis isn't dangerous. I just think people are really underestimating a fighter like Paddy after coming off of a loss to the current champion Justin Gaethje. If you go and watch tape on both fighters' last 5 fights, one thing that's going to stand out to you is that Paddy is the faster athlete. He might arguably even be more powerful athlete, and he also closes distance well compared to Benoit Saint Denis. His knees and uppercuts in the middle are excellent. You can see that in the Justin Gaethje fight that he just came out of, especially against opponents who change levels aggressively. He's also extremely dangerous on the mat, and people think of him as someone who wrestles aggressively, but I think Paddy's submission game is actually excellent from a defensive point of view. That's going to be an important factor in this matchup. BSD, on the other hand, is a tough fighter. When I call someone tough, I picture someone who takes a lot of damage but still stands their ground. So I don't necessarily think that's a compliment, but he's relentless, aggressive, and has a heavy wrestling game plan hidden behind his strikes to close the distance. Looking into a few of Benoit's last few fights, I wasn't really impressed. In fact, his performances against fighters like Krylek, as well as Dan Hooker, left me really confused. Because in both those fights, Benoit Saint Denis just didn't look like the fighter that he was hyped up to be. In the Dan Hooker fight, he was actually losing quite badly until Dan Hooker made some mistakes and BSD caught him with a submission. In the Kyle Prepperlick fight, again, even though Benoit Saint Denis came out with the win, I don't think he should have gone that long with someone that I don't think belongs in the UFC. Another thing with Benoit is he's too willing to get hit. This is why I call him tough. He closes the distance with his hands low, reaches out for double legs, and takes a lot of damage, where I think Paddy's going to be able to punish him in this fight. So looking at how Paddy can win this fight, I got a few clues from the fight that Benoit Saint Denis had against Dan Hooker. Again, he looked really slow in that fight. He kept plodding forward with his hands low, reaching for the double leg, and Dan Hooker kept threatening the guillotine. I think that deterred Benoit enough to change his game plan up a bit. But if Benoit comes in with the same game plan against Paddy the Baddy, I see Paddy cinching up a submission like a arm and guillotine and going to the ground just like he took out Bobby Green with. Another thing to note from the Dan Hooker fight was that he used kicks and teeps very effectively against Benoit, who fights out of the southpaw stance. In fact, if Paddy really wanted to capitalize on the stance difference, he should throw a lot of head kicks, because that is a weapon that comes in handy with open stance. If I'm coaching Paddy, I would want him to focus on 3 things during this fight: the clinch game, body kicks, and uppercuts. So in this fight, I think Paddy's going to be faster. I think he's got the better submission game. I don't think Benoit is going to abandon the wrestling. And while he may have his moments, I think eventually in round 2 or round 3, Paddy finds a finish by taking Benoit to the ground, mounting him, and finding a knockout, or by catching him in a submission and taking him to the mat. For my official prediction, give me Paddy the Baddy by finish in round 2 or round 3. All right, for the main event of the evening, we have the notorious Conor McGregor taking on Max Blessed Holloway. Conor coming in with 22 wins, 6 losses. Max, on the other hand, with 27 wins, 9 losses. The bookies have Conor sitting as a plus 180 underdog, Max as a minus 215 favorite. So to be honest with you guys, I haven't done a lot of tape study on this fight for 2 reasons. One, I am a huge fan of Max Holloway and I've been following his career over the last many years. But more importantly, this is actually a layoff of more than 5 years for Conor McGregor. And the big question is what he's going to look like coming back into the octagon. Conor needs no introduction. He's had many publicized issues outside of the cage, and simply put, I don't think he's been focusing on the fight game as much as Max Holloway has over the last 5 years. At this elite level, I think that activity matters more. And not to say that Conor isn't dangerous still. He still has a great left hand. I just don't see him being the same fighter as everyone remembers him to be. And I think that's why it's important to separate the emotions from what you might think would actually happen in this fight. Conor has been away. Max has been improving, taking on the biggest names in the fight game. He also has a knockout over the current lightweight champion, Justin Gaethje, which I think is just amazing, especially coming into this matchup against Conor. Sure, Max just lost a decision to Charles Oliveira fighting for the BMF belt, but I think, if anything, I'm actually more confident in Max because of that. In the build up to this fight, I've heard a lot of people talk about Conor McGregor's new wrinkle, which would be his wrestling. However, I just don't think that's going to be an effective weapon against Max Holloway, who historically has great takedown defense. At the end of the day, I do think Conor will have a big moment early, but I think Max Holloway will take this fight to a decision, and I wouldn't be surprised if he actually KOs Conor McGregor in the later rounds. On a historic fight card like this, I think Max is going to capitalize on the opportunity that's presented in front of him more than McGregor will. In fact, I think Max might even go for the finish in the later rounds. However, for my official prediction for this fight, give me Max the Blessed Holloway to win by unanimous decision. My best play for this fight is going to be Max Holloway's money line at -215. Alright, so if you made it to this point in the video, I just want to say a very large thank you from my side. This is my first YouTube video. I'm still trying to figure out the dynamics of how all of this works. Please let me know in the comments what you'd like me to do better next time, what you liked about the show, and look forward to seeing you in the very next one. Until then, let's enjoy these fights. Let's go.